There ain't many 370s around my ends, so when I found out the modded one featured in this video lived less than a mile away, couldn't resist nipping round in mine to treat it to some TLC. Although the exterior of this amuse-kitted Le Mans Blue example is treated to a regular wash and spray wax by its proud owner, thought there was still a little room for improvement here and there, as I can't have the local 370 contingent being repped in anything but the best light. Granted, it wasn't filthy, but following a spell of stormy weather, the paintwork was sporting some flotsam and jetsam. The concave multi-spokes and yellow calipers were in need of more than just a once-over with some shampoo, and the cloudy 11-year-old headlights were begging for a bit of clarity. Having already twiddled my thumbs for an hour or so while the morning wet weather passed, I got straight to it filling my buckets up first, which allows me to crack on with a contact wash following a wheel and pre-clean instead of faffing with the camera to film this afterwards. Buckets filled, the 19-inch Judd wheels were treated to a light pre-clean using some Bilt Hamber Surfex HD, which after being applied with a small Kwazar pressure sprayer, was rinsed off with the Kranzle pressure washer to prepare them for a more thorough clean. So I'd recently raided my spares and repairs cupboard and found this code red active wheel cleaner from Surf City, so decided to put the remainder of it to use here, as the inner areas of the wheels were quite heavily contaminated with fallout that a non-active wheel cleaner would have struggled to deal with. Once applied, the clingy green foam was left to soak for a couple of minutes while the other wheels were pre-cleaned, and once it had turned red, indicating the stubborn iron-based brake fallout was being chemically broken down, went in with a bunch of different shampoo primed brushes and a mitt that I had sitting in a separate bucket behind the camera to agitate all areas. Although I'm only showing you the highlights here, I probably spent a good 15 minutes on each corner, and while in all honesty they still needed more, I was behind schedule as it was, so an hour in total on the neglected wheels was the best I could offer. Because this particular Z is sporting such an impressive set of gangster angled fart cans, thought it was only right I gave them a quick once over after the wheels had been tended to, with the same all-purpose cleaner used for the pre-clean and a sudsed up soft brush to remove any traffic film.
Oh yeah, what's back in already?
back in the car onto some work ramps, and doing a proper poo shoot polish on these bad boys would likely yield some impressive aftershots, so might reserve that for a dedicated future video depending on how well this one does, but for now they'd at least had a bit of a wash. With the mankiest bits out the way, the relatively clean lower parts of the body were then treated with the all-purpose cleaner as a matter of course, before the entire car was blanketed with snow foam to help gently dislodge any loose dirt the dodgy weather may have deposited. And while I can't give you a definitive answer as to how I always managed to get it so thick, as a lot of people do ask, all I can tell you is that I use a Kranzle K7 pressure washer coupled to a heavy duty foam lance from Autobrite Direct, with the dial on the top turned fully counterclockwise to minus, filled most often with either an inch or so of Magifoam or avalanche solution. After being applied, it was left to soak in for a few moments to gently tease out the potentially abrasive loose dirt particles that you don't want knocking about during the subsequent cleaning stages, as well of course as to grab an obligatory foam dwelling shot for the gram. It was then all methodically rinsed off with the pressure washer to leave the surface free from any loose contaminants and ready for a 2-bucket contact wash. And from a swirl prevention perspective, this is one of the most important parts of the clean, as it's the best opportunity you have to remove as much swirl and scratch causing debris prior to making contact with the car as you can, so it's worth spending some time ensuring all areas see a decent rinse. Now that it was time for a contact wash, the summer sun had arrived on cue to make things more interesting, but if anyone's used to working under its rays, it's me. So I went about washing the Nissan's gloss black vinyl wrapped roof and surrounding blue paintwork with a thin but super soft microfiber mitt from Finesse that I actually use on my own 370, gently but thoroughly working it over all of the familiar panels in as timely manner as possible without rushing to remove any remaining dirt that the contactless pre-clean hadn't. After being fully contact washed, the car was given one final rinse down with the pressure washer to remove the lingering suds and cool the panels down a bit before they were dried. And for anyone wondering, I'm using the standard Kranzle gun here, just with a generic brass quick release fitting screwed on the end so that it can be used with either a 25 or 40 degree nozzle. Once rinsed, I went straight on to drying the car with a plush contrasting coloured Reaper towel from Autobrite Direct that again I also use on my own 370. Now, while a towel like this is supposed to allow you to fully dry an average sized car in one go without needing to be wrung out, in order to avoid potentially leaving streaks, I almost always find myself wringing my drying towels out at least once during the process, but that might just be the old school sponge jockey in me. The door shuts were then wiped over with a general purpose towel to prevent cross-contamination with the better quality dedicated one, and because they're just a bit easier to work around these more enclosed areas. Lastly, being so visible with the open rear bumper design, the cans were also wiped over, as I think they at the very least deserve a basic wash and dry along with the rest of the car. Once everything was dry, I then dressed the slightly stretched tyres with some glossy Gyeon Tire, which was first liberally applied with a brush and left to thoroughly soak into the rubber while the others were tended to off camera. Before being buffed over with a general purpose towel to remove any excess product and knock back the shine for a more factory looking finish. It was then time to brighten up the aging headlights a little with my aging Flex, a spot pad which by today's standards isn't really a spot pad at all, and some Menzerna medium cut polish. Now the owner does have a 3M restoration kit he intends to get to grips with, but for now, in order to prevent this car letting down the local 370 side, a single stage polish to eliminate the lion's share of the oxidation would have to do, as a full on restoration is sort of a separate video and job in itself. I didn't tape up the surrounding panels here, as I wasn't using a plastic specific or particularly heavy compound that could haze the paintwork, but generally you should tape up to at least allow you to confidently cover the edges of the headlights without having to worry. Once thoroughly worked over, the residue was buffed away with a fresh general purpose towel to reveal a still somewhat oxidised but noticeably clearer finish. To complete the spruce up then, I wanted to get some tinted wax on the metallic blue paintwork, as although it was clearly already sporting some protection, there's no harm in topping up a car that lives outside exposed to the elements. Plus this basically brand new tub of blue velvet had also been sitting in the spares and repairs cupboard, so was eager to put it to good use. I don't religiously stick to any kind of particular application technique with wax. Circular, straight lines, every which way, or go with the flow. It doesn't really matter to me so long as everywhere gets to see an even application of it. Now you may argue that tinted products like these are a bit gimmicky, and in certain respects you might be right. However, using something like this isn't going to do any harm, and even if it only makes a marginal difference to the finish, every little helps, as they say. Once I was done with tinting the 370's blue panels, I used some even more old school Collinite Insulator Wax on the freshly polished headlights, just to help them to repel the elements and keep them looking brighter for that bit longer. If they'd have been properly restored, I'd have looked at protecting them with something more long term, but for this particular job, a bit of durable wax was just a ticket. And following a final buff to remove the last bit of residue of the day, left it at that. Unfortunately, the dodgy weather was due back the very next day, so spending any more time chasing my tail on the car would have been a bit pointless. However, considering it's 11 years old, the 5 or 6 hours I did spend on it should still have it outshining plenty more modern motors for some time to come. Tail chasing aside, hope you enjoyed the fair lady being fondled on film. I for one can sleep well knowing that the other 370Z in my local area is now clean and presentable. As always, cheers for tuning in, and I'll try and sort something other than a burger badged Nissan to feature next time.